Okay, so really quickly before we get started, I want to cover really fast about what you guys are going to have for homework over the weekend. So if you have something to write what you're going to have to do for the weekend, whether it be your phone, your planner, your pager, your MySpace account messages to yourself, whatever you want, we're going to go over two really quick things that you guys are going to have due on Monday, okay? Now, one of them is going to be your notebook check, okay? So notebook checks, in theory, there was two assignments, the populism one, and then there was one that was a political cartoon analysis. Those should have already been done by now. The last thing I want you to do is, do you guys remember this packet thing that we said we were going to do every day, but then we didn't because we got too busy, okay? Your task, and this should take maybe 20 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes, depends on how fast you're going to do. If you guys remember how we did that assignment before, how you guys went through your terms and you put them in the individual slots on this paper, that's what I want you to do, okay? So, again, if you need to pull this out to remember that, I want you to find vocab terms, concepts. You only have to put the vocab term. So if you want to put down for major political parties appealed to lingering divisions and currency issues, that's populism. So I write down populism, free silver movement, whatever works for you. One per box. In theory, every single box should be covered. If you don't put something in a box, I'm going to maybe do probably 3 or 4 like freebies, as in if it's too difficult for you, because some of them are worded kind of hard. Sound good? Okay, part 1. Good? All right. Monday. We're going to do notebook check on Monday. Notebook, well, let's do this. Let's do notebook check is actually going to be on Wednesday. Change my mind. We're going to do this on Wednesday, and the reason why is because B-Day doesn't have a class on Tuesday. So we'll do it on Wednesday. So next Wednesday, this paper, okay? And then the other assignment that's due, you should have picked up. It says the scoop on it. I will explain that assignment. It's actually a really, really fun assignment, and I'll go over that when we get to that in today's lesson. Sound good? Yep. 2 homework assignments over, you have basically 5 days to do it. Sound fair? Yeah.
So is the scoop due on Wednesday as well?
Yes. So the scoop is due on Wednesday too. So, but that one is a really fun assignment. You will not, I have yet to have a student not like that assignment. It'll be a fun assignment for you.
Oh, cool. Microphone. Okay.
Do you want to speak later?
Yeah, no, wait.
Hold on. Bethany has a question.
Wait. Do we have anything due on Monday? Like just the packet?
Nothing's going to be due on Monday anymore because of the fact that B-Day doesn't have a class. Okay.
Jordan has a question.
Yes, Jordan. What's your question?
I didn't.
Okay. Anybody else have questions? No. Okay. Let's get started. So I want you guys to have out your notes. Mystery notes, because you don't know what it is yet. You don't know that.
I do know that.
It could be, could not be. Okay. All right, listen. Okay, so today we're going to be getting into, actually, now that I think about it, it's not even on my computer. Let's fix that real fast. It likes me. That's why it follows me. But now I have to walk slowly because when it does 360, sometimes it's, see, I have to kind of look at that. Trust me, the other day I was in here for an hour doing this and practicing it, and I had to lock my door because I was so embarrassed. So, trust me, it's not super great. Okay, so we're heading into the next period. This is period 7. Like I talked about last time, we have 2 periods left, and that's it. So we have 2 units, and then we study for the AP exam, and we're there. We're going to be going from 1900 to 1950. We're covering 50 years in theory, 12 days. That's not a lot, or time, to do that much stuff. Okay, so we're kind of going to be moving at a little bit of a fast pace. So today we're going to be starting with imperialism. Now, when we talk about imperialism, okay, by the way, this is in chapter 20. I haven't put up the reading guides. I know some of you in this class really wanted those. We haven't done that just yet. Now, let's talk about imperialism and why we are doing this whole thing of imperialism. Now, here's a really great thing. Who here took AP World or AP Euro? Who in those classes learned about imperialism?
We probably did. I just don't remember.
Great news. You can use that for historical context.
Great.
Anything that you learned in AP World or AP Euro having to do with imperialism, you can use in essays in this class. So that's great news for those of you who were like really big into the Opium Wars. Great news. You have another thing that you can use in this class. That's not Opium Wars. Because I have to read one more Opium Wars essay.
Opium.
You guys love opium. Not in a bad way.
Hey.
Okay. Now, when we talk about imperialism, was America the only ones being imperialistic at this time?
Probably not.
No. In fact, if you look at Africa, so this is the before picture of Africa, before the year, I think it was 1870 is this one. Afterwards, this is what it looks like. Okay? What happened to Africa during this time period? Yeah, it's imperialism, right? People are taking up and grabbing stuff. That's what imperialism is. It's just taking over other lands and making it into your own. There's a reason why in Africa people speak English in certain areas. South Africa in particular, they have their own language, but they mostly speak English because of the fact that they were colonized by the Dutch, right? South Africa was by the Dutch, I think. Not sure. That's okay. Now, when we talk about modern day imperialism, how does this affect us today? We have imperialism right now. Imperialism meaning going into other countries and doing things with those other countries, whether it be taking over or influencing them. For example, what country has this flag? North Korea. Okay? So, in North Korea right now, right, we have this major issue going on. We have Donald Trump against Kim Jong-un. What? It has nothing to do with this. Okay? Anyways, so when we're talking about this kind of situation, we're talking about what are we going to do with this problem. This is imperialism. Now, why are we going into North Korea? Well, America has this thing that you're going to see a trend where America wants to go and help others. It's the democratic American and Christian thing to do. Now, we saw this, by the way, with social Darwinism. So when we talk about this kind of a situation, a lot of people feel like America is going around and making little American countries. That's when we get into North Korea and the Korean War. Now, when we talk about this situation as well, why we're in North Korea, spreading democracy, right? Communism is bad. There's a reason we don't like Russia. We don't like the idea of communism. But we also have controversy of whether or not, is this really our problem? Should we be dealing with North Korea or not? That's a conflict going on with imperialism. Now, additionally about how we could infect people in imperialism is not just in war. It's also in mindset. Now, here in America, as much as you guys love to think that you're like the highest, like you do everything for school possible, is that the reality around the world? No. Kids in China go to school from 6 a.m. until 8 p.m. every single day.
I know I don't do the most I can for school.
Well, some people might think so, right? But this American ideology spreads around the world. And one example of a modern day example has to do with the Romanian gymnastics team. Now, if you don't know about gymnastics, Romania was like the top. Every year, win, until about the year 2004. See, in 2004, we started to create cell phones in America. And we began to text each other and become obsessed with our cell phones. And this gradually spread throughout the world into Romania. And the Romanian coach, last year at the Olympics, they didn't have a single person qualify in any event. And the Romanian coach was interviewed and they said, why is this happening? And he said, it's the Americanization of the world. These girls don't want to do gymnastics from 6 a.m. until 10 p.m. every night. Now they want to hang out with friends and text on their phones and be on Snapchat and Instagram. And he blamed all those things as the Americanization of the world. Now, when we talk about this Americanization of the world, we're talking about things like the McDonaldization of the world. Have you guys heard that term before? Yeah. Maybe in AP Human, they talked about that. So when we talk about the McDonaldization of the world, so McDonald's, right, is this idea of fast food. Now, other countries do not have originally this fast food idea. It was a very American idea because of the invention of the automobile and blah, 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 blah. Now, if you don't know about McDonald's, it has spread rapidly. McDonald's and Starbucks are the ones that typically are coming up in this. In fact, if you didn't know, in America, 71% of Americans live within 1 mile of a McDonald's. Okay? Now, this is a huge deal, and around the world, this is beginning to spread more and more, and it's called the imperialism or the McDonaldization of the world. Now, obviously, people don't like this idea. In fact, a lot of people protest it. China, in particular, was very anti-McDonald's because it was going against the traditional culture. It was causing obesity rates to rise, and people are starting to fear this imperialism or this modern-day imperialism going on in the world. Now, when we talk about this as well, and this is like a really kind of drastic one as well, What this is referring to is during the Iraqi War. Following the Iraqi War, or during the Iraqi War, I should say, we put in the very first McDonald's in Iraq. Now, this was a huge deal, okay? There's also a Starbucks in Iraq. Now, these, by the way, work very differently. In fact, the Starbucks one became the most famous because if you're not aware, in Iraq and Iran, women are not allowed to eat in the same location as a male. So, like, a male can go eat with a woman and her children, but a woman can't go into the male parts. It's very segregated. At a Starbucks there, the wall actually fell during an earthquake, and so they banned women from entering into the place. You were no longer allowed to go to Starbucks if you were a female because of that. So this idea of putting this modern-day stuff in was a huge, massive issue going on in Iraq. Now, when I was in Germany over the summer, and I know this is a really bad picture, this is my old phone, but I went to McDonald's. Now, if you don't know about Germany, though, food is actually really important. In fact, their lunch hours for schools are 2 to 3 hours long. And the reason why is while here in America, lunch is very short and dinner is longer, in Germany it's lunch. Lunch is the really big meal that goes on. And so what happened is that when I was in Germany, we ate at like these really big restaurants. And, you're getting like really kind of bigger-ish, right? Because you're eating big meals every single lunch because that's the German way to do it. But you go over and the McDonald's is like crazy big and very, very popular. And it's starting to change and adjust what's going on in Germany. Now, when I went to the Turkish Quarter in Berlin, though, this is where it gets different. You see, in Turkey and in the Turkish Quarter, it's very traditional. Stay with the Turkish and the German ways. And what happened is that with this traditional stuff, is a McDonald's really fit into this problem, or a Starbucks? No, it's traditional. McDonald's doesn't fit in these areas. Well, what happened is that they decided to put a Starbucks into this location. And they announced the place, and mysteriously a few days later, somebody set it on fire. So they picked a new place, right? Because that was just the accident the first time, right? Well, this time, somebody came in and smashed up the entire place. They took like an axe and smashed up the entire place. And what happened is that the community was so against the McDonald's because they said it was invading into their space. So positives of this globalization, right? Putting it across the world, cheaper food, blah, blah, blah. But the negatives, what is America's impact on the world? So that's this whole idea of imperialism in this part of the unit. What is our impact throughout the world? Now, when we talk about, I did not do this one. Okay, so reasons for the United States imperialism. You'll want to know that these are the causes. So if you want to put next to it like causes of U.S. imperialism, that's what this is. Why are we going throughout the world? Well, there's a couple of different reasons. The first one is military strength. Okay? Now, when we talk about the military, we're going to go into a guy named Alfred Thayer Mahan. Now, he's a pretty popular sourcing. So when you see his name, which is a pretty unique name, you should automatically think imperialism. Okay? Now, his sourcing will 100% of the time, as far as I've ever seen, be from this book, The Influence of Sea Power Upon History. That's his really famous book. Now, here is basically what he says. All of the great empires of the world, whether it be Rome, England, all of them have great navies. America, though, doesn't have a great navy. So, therefore, how can we be a great nation if we don't have a navy? Now, when we talk about military strength, this is going to be our upkeep in the navy, and then it spreads everywhere else when we get into the world wars. Now, Mahan was, I believe he was the admiral of the Navy, if I remember correctly, when he wrote this book. And this book was so popular. People started to invest money and say, we need to create this great military strength. Because in theory, if we create a great military strength, we'll be a great military brute force. So, for example, he creates what's called the Great White Fleet. And the Great White Fleet basically becomes this massive naval organization centered around these big, giant ships. Now, these ships, by the way, what do you think their color was?
Red.
Close. White. Okay? Now, think about the ocean. Is the ocean white? No, it's like a really dark blue, right? White on top of it sticks out. People are going to see this. So before, all the ships were brown, blackish, or they were like really, really dark gray, kind of like our ships now. Well, here's the thing, though. You couldn't see its might. From a distance, it's like cloaked. And that makes sense, right? You want to be cloaked when you're in the military. Here, though, they don't. They want to stand out. So they're going to wear the brightest colors possible. And this ends up expanding our fleet 3 times, and it now becomes the 3rd largest, which I think is the next one, the 3rd largest naval power in the world, which is huge because before we were basically like the worst naval power in the world. We didn't have anything. And this becomes especially important as we go along a little bit later. Now, another reason for this happens to be this guy. When you see this guy, what APUSH term should you use? Social Darwinism, right? Darwin believed this idea of evolution, and now we're going to take this evolution and apply it to racism. So when we talk about this social Darwinism, which, by the way, may be up next to causes, where it says social superiority or Darwinism, make sure you remember and do like a little arrow in racism. This is when we're going to justify our imperialism through racism. Okay? Now, how we do this. All of you are biologically born a certain way. And because of where you've lived in the past or your ancestry, your skull is actually shaped differently. That's how, if you ever seen the news, we're like, we found this body. It's approximately 25 years old, and it's of African American descent, or it's white. Have you guys ever seen that in the news or in the movies or whatever? Your skull is biologically different because of where you grew up. Well, here's the thing that they're saying. You are therefore biologically different. The minute you are born, your head is shaped differently. Therefore, your brain is shaped differently. Therefore, you are not as smart as another person the minute you are born. No matter what you do, you will never be as good as somebody else because of the way your skull and brain is shaped. Okay? Now, if you notice as well in terms of racism, so this is the African American. Again, note the features of how they draw this. What is it similar to according to this? What's down below? It's the ape. Okay? So again, this is another thing. Well, an African American skull is almost the exact same as an ape. Therefore, you are as dumb as an ape. That's the idea here. Okay? Now, over here as well, you have the African Americans on this side. Now, if you look at that picture up here, what other minority during the 1850s did that look like when we looked at the pictures before? Someone remember? Irishmen. Okay? Irishmen and Germans were drawn the exact same way. Everybody good on social Darwinism? Yes? Okay. Nifty. And so again, this is the idea of why we are able to start discriminating against people, because you are biologically less than me. It's just a race thing. It's just a genetic thing. That's the idea here with social Darwinism. So, reasons against imperialism. Okay? Well, there's a law. Is this fair to another person? Can you force somebody else to live the way that you want them to? That's where some of these concerns end up coming up. Okay? Now, we're going to go over a lot of these with actual examples. So, I put this more up here as a way to have the notes a little bit better organized. So, this next one we're actually going to skip, and we're going to come back to it later. Okay? So, we're going to skip this one for right now. So, we're going to come back to it. And then we're going to go down at the bottom. So, let me give you the first 2 examples of imperialism in America. Now, both of these examples, my suggestion would be to pick one that you know well, and I would know it well. These are actually pretty easy to be able to remember. You just want a bunch of examples of imperialism. So let's talk about Alaska first off. Now, Alaska, you guys have all heard of Alaska, right? Okay, last state in the Union. It's up here, and it's really, really cold, in theory. I know it's really warm. But in theory, everybody thinks this is super cold. Well,
Wait, what?
it's actually a lot warmer than you would think. Like, a lot of people think you can go in the summer and you're always going to be, like, in snow and stuff. That's not true. The reason why is because of the tilt of the, well, this is sciencey. Tilt of the sun. In the winter, it's facing. In the summer, anyways. Okay, so William Seward, who we've actually already talked about. We talked about him back in the Civil War. He has a big interest in Alaska. Well, up in Alaska, okay, does anybody remember what Alaska used to be known as, or like who used to own Alaska? Russia. Okay? Russia owns Alaska over here. And the reason why was because way back when, with the Clovis people, remember they went across the Bering Strait. So because this was connected, Russia used to own Alaska. Now, Russia really didn't care about Alaska that much. They kind of just let people live there. They weren't really too concerned. The majority of people that lived there were actually some Americans as well, but it kind of went all across. Who has a laser pointer? Whoever has the laser pointer, please don't be pointing it. Thanks. Okay. Anyways, So a lot of them were lumber and things like that, but they were a lot of timber. But a lot of people just like lived there to be able to make money, and Russia didn't really care. Well, here's the thing though. It was an icebox. It's cold. Why would anybody want to live there? It's just this barren wasteland. It's almost like America going and owning Antarctica. What's the point, right? So Seward thinks, I'm going to buy this place. Does a lot of Americans feel like this would be the best place to buy? No, it's cold. You can't grow anything. Can't find anything. It's useless. Regardless, though, Seward is going to, Seward, who's the Secretary of State during this time, buys Alaska for 2 cents an acre. This is a better deal than the Louisiana Purchase. So he spends, though, $122 million in today's money to buy Alaska. Imagine if Donald Trump announced that he was going to buy Antarctica for $122 million.
I'd say that's illegal. No one can.
I don't know if it's necessarily about illegal, but people would say you're an idiot, right? Why would you?
Yeah, no one's allowed to own it.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Well, now we're getting. Okay, This is why I shouldn't give modern day examples. You guys know too much. Okay. Well, let's pretend nobody owns it. It's just free. Okay. I don't know. I don't know the answers to your questions. Okay.
Maybe the robot knows.
Maybe. Okay. Well, we're pretending. We're pretending that. Okay. Anyways, you get the point, right? You get what I was trying to say. So we buy this land, and Seward looks like the fool. He's the idiot, right? But the reality is that we bought a lot of land. In fact, this land made up 1/3 of almost to 1/2 of the entire United States. So this was a massive amount of land that we bought. However, people don't see it as that. In fact, they call this what's called Seward's Folly, otherwise known as Seward's Icebox. This was to make fun of him. They're like, you know what you just bought? A bunch of polar bear land and ice. You literally are pointless. And Seward, I feel bad for Seward. Eventually, this becomes one of the best acquisitions ever, but people are just like making fun of him. Yeah, exactly. This is just an embarrassment to America. Why would you ever do this? However, if you know anything about Alaska, we find a lot of big stuff. So, Alaska, right before 1959, we find some very key parts of Alaska. We find minerals. Okay, that's fun. Minerals. Then we find timber. Okay. By the way, what big mineral was found? Gold. Gold was the big one. If you've ever seen Alaskan Gold Rush on Discovery Channel, yeah, they're not making that up. It's in real Alaska. Okay. In timber, some of our biggest timber mills, farms, our biggest ones are in Alaska, and then the biggest one of all, oil. The vast majority of our oil in America, we own like offshore oil rigs that are in international waters, but our biggest American ones, we have them in Utah, in all the dinosaur areas, and then also in Alaska. So Seward really wasn't appreciated until almost 40 years after he died.
And he was like, hey.
Yeah, and up in wherever he's at, he's like, ha, fools. I told you. And now Alaska is one of the most beneficial places in America, especially with tourism. So we go to this imperialism, doesn't seem like a good thing, but it's actually a very, very good thing. Any questions on Alaska? Okay, so let's go from kind of happy to a really sad story. Okay? So we're now going to talk about Hawaii. Okay? Now, has anybody been to Hawaii?
I'm going in March.
Do you like Hawaii? Is your hand still? Okay, nifty. Well, maybe you won't be so happy about Hawaii anymore. But
Please don't ruin this for me. I'm going for the first time in March.
that's okay. You can just go around and tell everyone sad stories. They'll love you. Okay. So let's talk about Hawaii. Now, Hawaii was originally owned by the indigenous people. Captain Cook, who's probably one of the most famous explorers in world history, discovers Columbusing Hawaii. Now, when he goes into Hawaii, which is in the mid-1800s, I think it's 1820s or something like that, he finds Hawaii, which is right over here, and it's perfect. It's a great trade spot. It's right in the middle of these two areas. Ships can be able to dock there. And originally, it's actually a very good relationship between the explorers and Hawaii.
Oh, and then we just...
Wait, not yet. This one I wouldn't say is more racism. I'll tell you what it is in a second. Now, this is just going into a little fun fact history about Hawaii. Now, one of the big things that Captain Cook brings is Christianity. His big thing was bring Christianity to the world. And so he did that to Hawaii. In fact, Hawaii becomes a very successful religious organization, but started off with a different organization. Who has seen this very good movie by a great company?
Yeah.
Yay! Next time you watch it, you're going to see Lilo get super mad at her sister, and she slams the door in her face, and she has this on her door. It's kapu. Okay? Anybody know what kapu means?
No.
Okay, so kapu basically means stop illegal. Okay? Basically, back then, the kapu system was the law system. But when we're talking about law systems, this is not some happy-go-lucky law system. It's actually pretty intense. So, for example, let's pretend you're a woman. Woo woo, shout out. Okay? If you were a woman, according to the kapu system, women were not allowed to eat bananas or pigs.
What else
Okay?
does Hawaii have?
A lot of stuff. Now, let's pretend, though, that you break this law. How would you be punished? Well, it's pretty fun, actually. You see, the first one is through torture. Okay? So, this, by the way, is usually about a 9 to 10 hour process. So, basically, they slowly suffocate you. Normally, what they would actually do is they would pull you and, kind of suffocate you, leave you there for a couple hours. Then they do it more and more and more until you eventually die of suffocation. But if that doesn't sound fun, let's make it even more fun by killing you to death with a club. Now, yeah. Well, what happens here, though, is this is where it gets a little bit intense. This is where you get the really cool clubs with the spikes and stuff, and the little knobs, so it's even worse than just being hit with a club. So this is the kind of punishment system that they had. So is this a very good candidate for Christian missionaries? Yeah, we're going to save these savages, right? Just like the Native Americans. So the Christians come in and they're going to Christianize the Native people. And in particular, yeah, thank you for that little cough. Now, the biggest one that ends up happening, though, as time goes on, Christianity does become completely ingrained in this religion, in this culture. In fact, one very prominent religion becomes the main Christian religion in this state. What is it? Mormonism. There is a reason that the Hawaii temple was one of the first temples to be built in the LDS Mormon Church. Now, if you go there right now as well, that's why they have such a big system as well. It has to do with family and things like that. But it all started back with Captain Cook, continued on, and now it's one of the biggest missions in the United States. Now, when we talk about as well, though, of why we have interest here, we have interest because of one thing and one thing only: money and sugarcane. We want this sugarcane because Hawaii is very good. That's a really good cause, by the way, sugarcane. Okay? Okay, wait for the story, and then you can decide if we did a good thing or a bad thing. Now, we want this sugarcane. Now, at first, this is okay, because if you don't know, or if you've ever been on a cruise, or if you've been to an airport before, there's this thing called duty-free. Duty-free is the agreement where basically if you buy that product and you bring it into the United States as a foreign product, you don't have to pay extra taxes on it. So if you ever go international and you fly back or you're on a boat, you have to fill out this little duty form. And if you spend, I think it's $500, more than $500 foreign, you have to pay a tax. Well, good news. Sugarcane is tax-free. We don't have to pay duties on it, which is great, until they take away the duty. And now our money is in jeopardy. We're not making as much money as we wanted to. So McKinley, who's president this time, William McKinley is going to do a tariff. Remember, tariffs raise the taxes on imported goods in order to be able to help this. So we're going to punish them. We're going to increase our tariff and make them want to trade with us more, right? Because they're going to take away the duties? No, it fails. So now we have another problem. We can't get the sugarcane in. Now, another reason why this was so important was strategy as well. It wasn't just necessarily money. In fact, Pearl Harbor gets created during the 1800s as a key trading port and also a key military port. And so we wanted this area because it was truly the center of the Pacific. We wanted to have control over the Pacific. Now, this is where it gets kind of sad. You see, Hawaii was under a monarchy. And originally we had a guy named the Merry Monarch. And he was a great monarch. He was very kind and very passionate. Well, the planters talked to some rebels. And they decide they're going to overthrow the monarchy. And they institute this thing called the Bayonet Constitution. Now, this had two things. First, it overthrew the government. But two, it helped the planters. We're getting rid of the guy that doesn't want us here. So the Bayonet Constitution overthrows him, and his daughter becomes the president. Now, you can actually watch a movie on Netflix, so if you've ever seen the movie, that's who we're talking about. And she becomes the queen of Hawaii, but unfortunately for her, it's going to go really sour really fast. You see, she is going to come under military control. She comes in, and basically the American, and this is like not official, but Miss Ray is telling you sort of history. We may have helped fund the military takeover over Hawaii.
It's almost like we're racist.
Not yet. I would say this one's more economic, though. This one is much more of an economic takeover of Hawaii. We wanted the sugarcane plantations.
It's almost like we're using them for their resources.
It's almost like a continuity in American history. So we take over, and she lives the next, I believe it was 5 years of her life under military control. Now, she really has no power here. She's basically a figurehead. And if you watch the movie, she's very young, by the way. I think she's like 22 or something like that when she takes over. I mean, she's basically put under military control. And eventually, they're able to gain this independence and say, now you're free of the monarchy. Now, the person who really comes behind this whole thing is a guy named Sanford Dole. What does he sound like?
Dole plantation.
Ever heard of Dole Whips before? Or Dole pineapples? Well, bananas were done by Dole, but that's actually a whole other takeover of South America. Okay, listen. That Dole also comes in later when we go into World War II and we take over Latin American countries for their bananas. Now, okay, listen. Not yet. Okay. Listen. Hey. American history is fun. So, Sanford Dole, though, is the major plantation owner in Hawaii. He sells pineapples. So, when you go, Cade, I don't know if you're going to Oahu, that's a really big one, but in Oahu, you can actually go and visit the Dole plantations, and they'll give you free ice cream, and you get to go around, and it's really happy. Well, Sanford Dole himself helped fund this rebel cause. He helped fund this takeover. He knew if America gets control over the islands, profit will be easily made. Now, what ends up happening is because of this, he sent a letter personally to McKinley, and we annexed. By the way, you will want to know the term annexation. You know the term annex from what other state? Texas. Okay? This is, remember, annexation is where you don't buy the country. You're not given the country in war. You say, this is now our country, part of our country. And so we annex and take Hawaii, and now becomes part of our states, and eventually becomes one of the states in the Union. It was originally a colony, and now it's a state. So now you can see we're getting slightly more controversial, right?
It's almost like we have a history of
It gets worse?
Yes.
It gets worse.
Just wait. It'll come.
It always gets
All right. Now, by the way, if you want to say, hey, how do I celebrate William McKinley's awesomeness of annexing Hawaii? You can go use a $500 bill.
That's a thing.
It was a thing until it was basically pointless. But I'll tell you this. If you ever get a $500 bill, don't spend it. It's worth like $20,000. But if you ever want to go celebrate him, you can go spend your $500 bill and say, go McKinley. Now, McKinley did some good stuff too. I shouldn't say McKinley was a bad president. He just took over a lot of other countries that weren't his. Okay, I didn't say that. So now we're going to get into one of my favorite events that's never talked about. It's the Spanish-American War.
The Splendid Little War.
The Splendid Little War it's like a nickname. I believe it was Teddy Roosevelt was the one that first nicknamed that. That's why it's called Splendid Little War. This is how your textbook puts the chapters because people like textbooks. So let's talk about causes of the Spanish-American War. You will need to know the causes of why we went in there. And we're going to talk about this a lot. Notice how the very first blank is what? Money. We love money, and we love making money. So basically, imperialism, a lot of this revolves around the idea of making money and succeeding in terms of monetary things. We'll talk about the rest in a second, but we're going to move on.
Are we going to go back?
Are we going to go back?
Yeah, didn't we need to do the anti-imperialist?
No, we said we're skipping that one for right now. We're going to come back to that because it's more applicable in just a little bit. Just wait. It comes back. I have a little star asterisk when it comes back. Okay. So let's talk about the Spanish-American War and why we wanted this. Now, this all centers around Cuba. You will need to know Spanish-American War, Cuba. That should be the first country that comes to mind when we talk about Cuba. Now, Cuba, as we know, is not that far off of Florida. I think it's something like 50 miles off the coast of Florida. If you ever go on a cruise, I got to see it, and that was when I was on my cruise. We went past it, and 2 days later, they announced that they were taking away the blockade of Cuba. So, Cuba is down here in the Caribbean. Now, if you know anything about the Caribbean and about tropical areas in general, what do we have? Not pirates. Sugarcane. More sugar. So we need more sugar. And the reality is America was super happy with investing millions of dollars into the sugarcane plantations. So now we have an economic interest in what's going on in Cuba. Well, here's the thing, though, is that in this area, slavery is still a thing. And we're talking about the majority of Cubans and African Americans in this area were massively enslaved. And we talk about, not having good slave life. We're talking that the average slave had a lifespan of 1 to 3 years. It was bad. You were hot, humid, and you were treated terribly. So this was another almost cause. People wanted, again, just like the abolitionist movement of the Civil War, they wanted to be able to cause slavery to end. Now, we decide we're going to help this out. So we have a guy, Jose Marti, and he is going to be the rebel cause. So if you think of this like Rogue One or like Star Wars, it's honestly this rebellion, right? He is going to uprise against the owner of Cuba, who is Fidel Castro. Comes a lot later. Spain is what we were looking for. Spain, the country. So close, though.
I really wanted to say.
No, Fidel Castro will come up later. We'll talk about him in the 60s. Okay, listen. So they're going to uprise against Spain, but unfortunately, Spain is going to send one of their biggest, baddest people, who, in my opinion, looks scary. I don't want to deal with him. Okay? Now, he is going to be put in charge of squashing this rebellion, and this is where it gets really sad. You see, what they're going to do is they're going to take the rebels and they're going to put them into concentration camps. So this term of concentration camps is not something that just comes up in the Holocaust. This is something that's happened hundreds of years. So they put approximately 300,000 rebels into concentration camps. And we talk about life in the concentration camps. It is not good. We're talking one piece of bread every couple of days. You are worked to the bone. This is not just adults. This is kids as well. And they take these and basically live in Holocaust-like conditions. I mean, this is deplorable. And when Americans begin to see this, they want to help them out, and they want to, remember it's that like carrying social gospel kind of thing? We want to be able to help out somebody who can't help themselves. Now, when we're talking about this as well, this is definitely one of those things that Spain, this is a bad thing in Spain. So if you're talking about just America doing bad things, which America's a great country, I love it, Spain did bad things too. The Dutch did this as well. Germany did this as well. Concentration camps were a big thing in imperialistic times during this time period. By the way, another great historical context. I don't know if you guys learned, I know he talks about it because I overheard it, that like German imperialism in Africa or any sort of concentration camps, you can use that as historical context during this time. In fact, you can technically use the Holocaust because you can contextualize afterwards as well. Anyways, so another thing they did too was mass public execution. People would be accused as spies. As long as you were considered a spy, you could be executed without due process. And they massively executed these rebels. And so when we're talking about death, we're talking about things like this. Okay? Massive death. This is very, very harsh, and this was all due to trying to squash a rebellion. So imagine if during the Revolutionary War, this same exact stuff was happening. Oops, I pressed the wrong buttons. Was happening as well. Okay? So, all of this, again, anger, frustration, why is this happening? And then we get to one of my favorite parts of American history, because I just think it's interesting. Now, we remember these two guys, right? William Hearst and Joseph Pulitzer, and also if you've seen Newsies, they're included in this as well. They began to write these newspapers. Remember McClure's magazine, Cosmopolitan, And the big thing that they're going to create is something similar to these. What are these called, if you say this? Tabloids, right? And people love tabloids. They love picking up these things, finding all the juicy secrets that's going on, right? Are these like little words and texts? No, they're like big, scream, like exclamation marks, lies, right? Well, and cocaine, yes. But these are like the big screaming headlines that you guys see because they want you to pick it up, right? Are you going to walk by and if it's like in itty bitty letters like possibility of drug addiction or something like that? Yeah, hands off my wife. This is what we're talking about. Like, okay, for the record, this is not about reading the tabloids. It's just an example. You don't have to read all of it.
$400 million divorce.
Okay, listen. So these tabloids, though, come up during this time, and what it's referred to as is what is called yellow journalism. That is a key term, yellow journalism. By the way, yellow journalism can also be used in the progressive era with muckrakers. Okay? Now, yellow journalism is the modern-day tabloid. Okay? What it is this big, crazy stuff, like survives mad leap, and oh, look, this lady's falling. By the way, there was no real printed ads in newspapers for pictures, so everyone had to draw stuff over and over and over again. But this is like the stuff that's going to absolutely grab you and make you want to read this newspaper. Because nobody wants to read a boring newspaper, right? Now, this yellow journalism, though, this is a cause of the Spanish-American War. In fact, I would say why Americans supported it, the main cause, was yellow journalism. And we'll talk about why in just a second. Yellow journalism becomes one of the most important causes of this war. Newspapers themselves basically make Americans want to go to war with Spain. Now, when we talk about this yellow journalism, this is an example. So I want you to think, is this one-sided or not? Okay? No man's life, no man's property is safe in Cuba. American citizens are imprisoned or slain without cause. American property is destroyed on all sides. Wounded shoulders can be found begging the streets of Havana. The horrors of a barbarous struggle for the extermination of the native population are witnessed in all parts of the country. Ready? Blood on the roadsides, blood in the fields, blood in the doorsteps, blood, blood, blood. Is there no nation wise enough, brave enough to aid this blood-spitting land? Is this very, nonpartisan? No, it is very clearly on one side, right? This is going to be the stuff that's going to convince you of what's going to happen. Now, this yellow journalism, though, comes up in a very, very important event. In fact, where it says causes of Spanish-American War, you should highlight, in just a second, USS Maine. Okay? USS Maine. This is the triggering of the war. Now, as we begin to see this stuff going on, Americans begin to shift the tide towards wanting to go to war. This is, again, very social Darwinistic, very, we must help the little ones, right? We have to help them. Lady Liberty, this poor person, we must save them. This is the idea that the Americans are the ones that can save the poor, helpless souls in Cuba. Now, this begins to be very political ads. People are beginning to really feel like we need to start to do something about this. And this whole idea, by the way, of propaganda begins to especially start to come up because America is seen as the great protectorate and the great protector of the Cubans. Now, William McKinley, though, ends up kind of moving towards this. He's cautious. He doesn't really want to go into a war, right? We haven't really been into a war with somebody else since the War of 1812, Mexican-American War. But unfortunately, some other people disagree. You see, some of our allies in France, they write this letter called the Delhomme letter. And basically, the New York Journal leaks it, and it pretty much calls McKinley the worst president that's ever existed because he's super not doing what he's supposed to do. And he's basically just like sitting on his butt doing nothing. Okay? That is what they say. So McKinley now has something to prove. I'm going to prove you wrong. And it all comes down to this beautiful ship called the USS Maine. Okay? And the USS Maine becomes an absolute trigger point. But unfortunately, the before picture and the after picture. Something very bad is going to happen to the USS Maine. So this is what I need you to do. Okay? Take your packet that you should have picked up when you came in. Go ahead and flip it to the second page. Says document A. Okay? This is what I want you to do. Okay? I want you to read through this. Okay? So I want you to go ahead, read through this, highlight or underline, in your opinion, the 3 most important parts of this document. Make sure you start at the very top, by the way. So, highlight or underline the 3 most important parts of this document. We'll do that later. So, highlight or underline the 3 most important parts of this document. Once you are finished highlighting or underlining the 3 most important parts that you feel like say what this document is, okay, then what I want you to do is I want you to go ahead and look up at me so I know who's finished. Okay. In the margins, wherever you want in the margins, whether it be at the very bottom of your page, I don't really care. All right, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions that I want you to answer. So question number one. So you just say 1 dot. Okay? I want you to answer this question. How long after the explosion of the USS Maine was this written? So, how long after the USS Maine exploded was this written? If you look at the very bottom, you'll see the date. And I'll give you a little bit of a hint on this one. The date of the USS Maine explosion was the night of February 16th. And this was written the morning of February 17th. So think about how long was this one written afterwards. Okay. Question number 2. What do you think the newspaper's point of view is of this incident? What do you think the point of view is of this incident from the newspaper's point of view? Okay, last question, number 3. According to this, why did the USS Maine get destroyed? So according to this, why did the USS Maine get destroyed? So how did the USS Maine get destroyed based on what you just read?
How? That changes it completely.
Well, it's the same. Why did it get destroyed or how did it get destroyed? It's the same thing.
No, those are very different.
No, I guess I should say, yeah, how did it get destroyed? Yeah, how did it get destroyed? Which in theory, it could practically be the same thing of like who destroyed it or what could it possibly be. Okay, so this article was written about 8 hours after the event. So very soon. Now remember, during this time, newspapers were like boom, boom, boom. You had maybe 10, 15, if you've seen Newsies, you know this, 10, 15 newspapers per day, constantly like, it's almost like tweets, like constantly sending out tweets to people except they're giant newspapers. Okay? Now, according to this article, first off, is this pro or anti-Spain? Anti. Yeah, I wouldn't want to be Spain after reading this. This is the tabloid of like, don't touch my wife. Well, now it's don't touch Cuba, right? Don't touch the Americans. This is what's going on. It's big and in your face. But according to this, how did the Maine explode?
So they like put a bomb on the ship. And
Who did?
The Spaniards, because they're super evil, and they were like, "Yo, we're gonna wait till you're sleeping," and then they like blew it up.
Yeah, imagine these poor, hopeless young boys sleeping, dozing off, dreaming about their homeland, and a bomb goes off and they're massacred, right? That's what's going on here. Now, people are angry, right? People are furious. I mean, this is like Pearl Harbor, September 11th. This is the same exact thing going on. And people begin to go through those. So this is, by the way, the very first alert of what happens. It says 10 Admiral Maine blow up and destroyed, 7 lighthouse, many Navy killed and wounded, all this stuff, right? We're having an emergency. It's basically like Pearl Harbor is the equivalent, right? And people begin to see these photos of just like hundreds of American boys and men dead. And these poor boys, their mothers must be bawling their eyes out at home. And people are angry and they're furious, right, at what's going on. And these images of the USS Maine begin to infuriate people and begin to call for war. Okay? This becomes the major, again, trigger point, similar to Pearl Harbor, September 11th of the Spanish-American War. But now we're going to realize another problem. You see, if you flip to the next document, document B, this, by the way, was written 8 hours after the other one. So this is written the night, if you look at the bottom, the same night. And I want you to do the same activity here. Read through this. Highlight the major stuff. And you're going to end up be answering the same questions as you did before. Once you have read through it, question number 1 I want you to do, when was this written in comparison to the first one, which I already went over with you. And you can also see at the bottom as well when it says the date. Okay? 2, is this like, what's the opinion of this? Is this more biased? Is this anti? Is this pro? What do you think? And the last one, according to this article, what actually happened with the USS Maine? Are you telling the answers? Okay, pause.
Oh, we're writing them.
We're right. Yes, yeah. Write them down in the margin. Just remember, number 1, in comparison to the last one, when was this written? 2, what's the position of the newspaper? Is it biased? Is it not? And 3, what actually happened to the USS Maine? So in comparison to the last one, when did this occur? You just want to answer all the questions?
Yeah.
Okay, so when did it occur compared to the first one?
Okay, it happened like later. Like
In the same day, right?
Yeah. But
So
like,
we're the same day.
a little bit later.
Okay, and then 2?
It's like a little more neutral, but it's like kind of biased to the other side, like, but like because it's saying that it didn't happen. But it's like it's hard to tell like if they're biased or they're just like saying what
Are
happened.
they just kind of like a regular news source at this point?
Yeah.
They're not really tabloids anymore, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like being written neutral, I guess.
Okay, and then 3rd, what really did happen to the USS Maine?
So they're saying that it was like there's like an overheat and like a fire inside the ship, and then it just like blew up. Because that happens in ships apparently.
Yeah, so did Spain blow up the USS Maine? No. What happened is, if you don't know what a magazine is basically in like a gun. It's the thing that circles through the bullets, okay? So basically, this thing that circles bullets around, as it was functioning, it blew up the ship. So Spain had nothing to do with it. It was just a mechanical error. It was a mistake, okay? Now, what I want you to think about in this circumstance is document A or document B. Which one is yellow journalism? It's A, right? It's largely exaggerated, things like that. Which one are people going to probably care more about? A, right? They want to hear what they want to hear. By the way, if you think about this today, okay, when you talk about like fake news and stuff like that, is that yellow journalism at a certain point? Yeah, it's like the attention grabbing. It's like, it'll be something like, man walks into Wendy's and dies a vicious death. Click here to find out. It's the clickbait, right?
Yeah, there you go.
Sure, I don't know that one, but sure. But these are like the attention-grabbing things that are supposed to grab you. It's clickbait. That's all it is. It's things to get your attention, right? And that's what goes on here with yellow journalism. Now, the reality is that during this time, this is what happens. Everybody publishes the story of the USS Maine. People are fearful, people are angry, and people are mad. Nobody cares that some magazine supposedly threw up. It was clearly Spain. And so what happens is now we want to go to war, right? Yep. To hell with Spain, remember the Maine, right? This was the idea. It was the same thing as remember the Alamo. We're going to go to war with Spain. And people truly thought Spain was just going to be like, hey, surrender. Nobody thought it was going to be an issue. Okay? So now we're going to go to war with Spain, and it's going to be called the SpanishAmerican War. Okay. Yeah, little splendid war. It's only 2 years long, by the way. Very, very short war. Yeah. And so we end up declaring war on Spain. Now, let me explain really quick your homework assignment. Okay? It's very easy. It's very fun. If you will look at the second page, normally I don't give you my example because I don't want you to copy it. But I know that you guys are just so stinking awesome at being great students, you're not going to copy mine. Yes? Okay. So let me explain what you are going to do. You are going to be able to create your own yellow journalism. So there's 2 parts to this assignment. Okay? Part number 1, which is above the fact or fiction part and above. You can pick any event in American history that we've talked about. Okay? Any event in American history. And if you want to write that down, that's nifty. So if you don't want to do Spanish-American War, Alaska, Hawaii, you don't have to. You can pick any event that we have talked about in this class. You are then going to create your own yellow journalism. So if you look at the front, you'll see that this is like the blank side. Okay? So things that you need. One is a picture. Okay? Now, you're lucky today that back then they didn't have color pictures in their newspapers. However, I have to show you put some effort in. So if you draw a frowny face in here, and I can tell it took you less than 2 seconds, put slightly more effort in. Okay? Then, right here in this big box is and if you need to write down, by the way, like at the bottom, that might be helpful. Is that your question, Zach?
No, can we put a picture there?
You can. I will allow you, if you have the ability to, if you want to put the effort and find a good picture, then that's fine. But it has to be an exaggerated, like a yellow journalism type of picture. Okay? So, in this box right here, that is what is called your headline. That is your attention grabber. So if we go all the way back and we look at the tabloid pictures, okay? So that is this, okay? This is your headline, your big, pay attention to me headline, okay? It's not the expensive one though. That's okay. This one is like $100, so this one is not that expensive. Okay, next one. Underneath, this is what you call a subheading or a subtitle. Okay? This is not your story. So if you look here, so Blake dumps Gwen is your headline. Subtitle, her confession that changed everything. I don't know.
Or she never loved me.
Or she never loved him in the first place, or something like that, okay? Then, but you're not doing that because this is for a push. So, no, please don't write about cocaine. Okay, down here though, okay? Okay, listen. So down in this big box with the lines, that is your story. You do need to fill up all the lines. So that is your exaggerated, crazy story. So if you look at where I did my example, oh, how terrible is Spain. Men, most in the prime of their youth, were slaughtered by the terrible Spaniard fleet. Each of them had bright futures ahead of them when they were cut short after being murdered. Mothers around the country are weeping for their lost sons. Okay? So, that is your Miss Ray wants you to connect this to class part. You guys ready for the ultra fun part, though? Okay. Let's talk about the bottom part. Now, if you refer to the example that I gave you, you do not have to pick history. This is just you practicing the difference between fact or fiction in terms of practicing writing a kind of true story, maybe boring, but a true story, and a wildly crazy clickbait story on the right. So, for example, early Monday, Miss Ray was teaching her history class. She tripped and fell. She received a minor cut in her hand and fixed it with a Band-Aid. Okay? That's your fact. That's the real life. Now, by the way, we don't have to go personal here. You don't have to talk about, like, that one time your hamster ran away. I don't know.
No,
but
Jimmy.
this can be a made-up story, too. So my favorite is when students show up late, and they all make the crazy stories about why they were late, okay, or whatever it could be. Then on the right is your crazy, exaggerated yellow journalism story, okay? So, for instance, thousands wait in sheer agony after hearing their favorite teacher, Miss Ray, was injured on the job. She received a massive laceration that will likely require 100 stitches, and she will unlikely return to full strength. So, there are bits and pieces that could be true, like the laceration and Miss Ray being there, okay? But wild, crazy, tabloid-level exaggeration, okay? This is your fun section. Sound good? Altogether, it takes about 20 minutes to do at most. It's a really easy assignment. Sound good? Okay, so that's your homework assignment, and now we're going to move on. Okay? So you can put this away, and we're going back to notes. What's that? My other two classes did. I don't know if you guys ever did. I'll figure it out. Okay. All right. Oops. I forgot that these two are off. Okay. All right, listen. So, let's go into what happens in the actual Spanish-American War. So, we start the Spanish-American War by having our Commodore, George Dewey, is going to start this war. Now, we have learned about this word before, right? What armed forces has to do with the word Commodore? It's the Navy. Sort of like the sea power one that we talked about, Alfred Herman. This is going to be the showing of whether or not we have a good naval force, okay? So he is going to be the Commodore of the Navy. And he is going to plan out the first battle. Yes?
Related to the Dewey Decimal guy?
No, this is a different person. There's apparently a lot of people who say Dewey's the last name. Now, he is going to plan an attack. So let's pretend that you are attacking for Cuba's freedom. You are at war with Spain. Where do you guys think you're going to attack?
Spain.
Cuba? Maybe. Middle of the ocean, maybe. Spain? Maybe. Here's where you're going to actually attack. The Philippines. And you're probably like, what? Why the Philippines? So the Philippines were one of the colonies of Spain, but nobody really cared about it. It was like the Alaska for Russia. But here's the thing. If you can take over one colony, you're more than likely going to be able to take over the rest. So we are going to attack into the Philippines. And this is where you get what's called the Battle of Manila Bay, which you may have heard of before. It's one of the great naval battles. And it is wildly successful. Commodore Dewey becomes a massive celebrity because of this incident, because now we're realizing America has an awesome Navy that we're going to be able to succeed at. And now Dewey ends up becoming extremely famous. In fact, if you go to the Philippines, Dewey is on their money. People see him as a liberator of the Philippines. Well, America then becomes this idea of the great American protectorate. Now, not only are we protecting Cuba, and we'll talk about Puerto Rico later, but we're also all the way across here into the Philippines. We're expanding our reach, aka imperialism, throughout the entire world. Now, there you go. Now, at the same time, people say, why are we enslaving or work on these Philippines? The Philippines are like 2,000 miles away from America. It has nothing to do with us. This is very similar to people that are saying, why are we dealing with North Korea? It's all the way over there. It's not our problem. That's what people say about the Philippines. Are we really freeing them, or are we just enslaving them into the Americas? Now, we decide to invest millions of dollars into the Philippines. So we overtake Spain, but now we're going to free the Philippines from Spanish rule. So we fund millions of dollars into the rebel cause. Again, very like rebel thing. Now we decide to spend all of our money on this dude because he is the general of the rebel forces. But guess what? We fund millions of dollars into a guy that wins, and guess what he's going to do to the people who we beat? He's going to put them into concentration camps and kill them all. So what happened with Spain in Cuba of concentration camps and all the things that we went to, the person that we fund in the Philippines does the exact same thing to Spanish in the Philippines. So again, if we talk about continuities, this is stuff that comes up all the time. So in the end, a guy named General Arthur MacArthur, which is a super fun name.
That's a super creative one.
So, listen. General Arthur MacArthur ends up helping free and liberate the Philippines. He basically takes down the insurgency. They assassinate this rebel leader. They are able to free the Philippines, and Arthur MacArthur becomes massively famous. In fact, their airport is named after Arthur MacArthur. And additionally, because you might say, but isn't it just MacArthur Airport? It's not just named after him. It's also named after his son, Douglas MacArthur. Military buffs? The Korean War. Okay? So we'll talk about that later when we talk about Douglas MacArthur. But he and his son make massive impacts, and they're also on his money. We're not done yet. They also celebrate his birthday as well. And it's either his birthday or something like that. They celebrate a day where they have a national holiday. Okay? So we're going to go ahead and we're going to stop there. Okay? So we're going to stop there only because we have about 1.5 minutes left. And then we're going to actually go to war in real Cuba when we're fighting for Cuba.